Welcome to the Intercut podcast channel. I am your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, he's gaslighting me, it's Arturo Zurita.
I love how, a bunch of the lines from this movie, while it is a tight script, are, all improv. That's a great improv line. I like the one where it's, you're silencing me is a great improv line. And I'm pretty sure everything that Pete Davidson did in this movie was not in the script. He probably read it. He knew he was supposed to say something, and then he said his alternative version of it.
Yeah. It definitely is a film with a lot of naturalistic, very authentic feeling dialogue. These don't feel quite so written. It's not necessarily the most writerly movie, but it is a very modern, casual approach to a familiar genre. We're, of course, talking about Bodies, 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 the new horror comedy distributed by A24, following a group of rich 20-somethings who plan a hurricane party at a remote family mansion. The party games turn deadly as the friend group starts to turn on one another with accusations of backstabbing, both literal and metaphorical. Art, first of all, have you ever played a Bodies, Bodies, Bodies style game?
I know it as Mafia. What do you know it as?
I know it as Mafia too.
Okay, good.
For some reason, I feel like we played it during grade school, which seems like a weird.
I don't know about that. We were still playing tag. We weren't murdering, but I have heard it be called werewolf. I feel like everyone nowadays just knows it as Among Us, and that's how a lot of people have been pitching this. It's A24's Among Us, but it's interesting to see a lot of people who I've seen review this movie who didn't understand the game, and in not understanding that game, they actually thought it was a dumb plot element in the movie. And I'm like, no, this is a real game. Real people play this, so there is rules to this. Again, the idea being that there's a killer among them and nobody knows who it is, and you're kind of judging off people. And it is fascinating to see actors who act for a living play this game, and just the idea that the behind the scenes was them playing this game to prep for the role. Sounds kind of fun.
Yeah, I remember when I played Mafia back in the day, it was like you would shake everybody's hand and then somebody would try to put their finger sort of on your wrist while you're shaking their hand, and that was the cue that they're the killer. So it's a game that people play and stuff.
That's pretty
maybe
intricate.
You're at a bit of a disadvantage if you haven't played a version of Bodies, 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 Werewolf, Mafia, whatever it's called. But it is an interesting way to adapt the Agatha Christie murder mystery into a modern setting. The marketing really does sell this as a very modern Gen Z, late millennial spin on that kind of whodunit, everybody trapped in a box type of movie. Did you find it too modern or just right?
No, it's definitely of its time. This is a movie that understands that it doesn't need to redefine the genre, because a lot of people have been seeing this or wanting to go into it as a slasher, which I still think it does have a lot of elements of a slasher, but it's definitely a paranoid thriller. It is a paranoid thriller through and through. And if you go into that, you're going to love the flourishes of the slasher that comes into it, the murder mystery that's being played throughout the movie. But I love that fact that they're all enclosed in this big mansion because there's a hurricane going on outside, but the real storm's happening inside with their friendship. There's a lot of dramas that I would compare this to. I think there's definitely a bunch of slashers that people relate it to from Scream and forward, but it reminds me of those independent films where a group of friends who have been together for the longest time get together, and for the first time they decide to finally open up about each other and what they really feel. That's what this movie really gets right, and putting people in a claustrophobic type of environment, it escalates that. So very effective.
Yeah, whether you're into it for that kind of murder mystery whodunit element like Clue or something, or you're into it more for this friend group dissolving as they confront each other about things they've kept secret from one another, I think Bodies actually is pretty successful at delivering in both realms. It's got those modern elements and that kind of Twitter speak thing happening, but as opposed to the trailers for this movie, I did not find it to be overwhelming. I didn't find it to be over the top or obnoxious. It just sort of felt like they were trying to craft these personalities that are, of course, of a modern age, but they didn't run them into the ground in a way that I was expecting the movie to do.
And I had seen it at South by, so I knew the tone that the movie had. Right. So when the trailers dropped and you were watching them, and I'm like, I promise you, Zach, someone in the trailer department, in the marketing department, hates somebody on this film because they make it come off. it feels like that Saturday Night Live sketch, the Gen Z hospital that
Yes.
Elon Musk did, which is just the worst way of one generation looking at another generation. This actually feels like people who are of Gen Z can watch it and not be like, this is a Twitter embodiment of who I am. This is an older person who wrote me. It feels like them. And I think it's able to use a lot of the words that may be buzzwords to a lot of people in an actual authentic way. These feel like characters who would drop it on a daily basis. But even more than that, they use it as a commentary, because this is a satire on why they use these words and the idea that saying these things and making themselves the victim can remove them of any responsibility or blame. And there's just a beautiful through line in the movie that handles that well. And it doesn't come off as parody. It comes off as a true satire.
That's a great point. It's not done to mock these people. It's done to actually tell you who they are, give you a better glimpse of them. And I think that's one of the ways in which the movie really does succeed, is that you have this group of people who are very knowable, right? Like they are crafted characters in a way where I bet you the actors can give you a whole backstory that never made it to the screen. They
a
feel
friend who they
like
based it
people
off
who
of.
Exactly, right? And it makes it go from being not just parody to like actual representation of a thing that's happening. Yeah, there is some sort of like there is a satirical element to it, but I think it stays in the realm of feeling true to the characters. It stays funny. It's not overdone. You mentioned earlier how there is kind of like a slasher element to the film. It's not like a terribly bloody movie, but you do get that body count throughout the film, and it keeps things very suspenseful. I was pleasantly surprised by how much bodies kept me guessing up until the final moments. I felt like there were 4 or 5 different characters who my suspicions turn to at different moments, and then even the characters that you don't feel suspicious of, you remain aware that like, oh, the movie could be pulling off some big twist and it could be them the whole time. So I never really ruled anybody out, and I think that's one of the things you really want from this kind of story.
It's been a while since you've seen a movie like that, because usually you just know, okay, they're just filler there for that moment, and this one, I think it plays it beat by beat very well. How did you feel about the characters overall? I don't know if you had a favorite, but more than anything, I've been seeing a lot of people looking at this movie going like, oh, they're just unlikable. Ding, ding, ding. Yeah, I think they're supposed to be that. And they play it off so well.
I think there is an element of trying to critique this sort of self-absorbed narcissism that sometimes gets equated with, late millennial Gen Z culture, this need to constantly self-analyze and speak your truths or whatever.
Everyone needs a podcast.
Exactly. Everybody has something vital to say, and I don't know. Maybe we should host this podcast. I think that ultimately, I think it does a nice job of making the movie kind of not just including these people, but about what that type of culture and infighting and constant self-correcting ultimately leads to, right? Like this is a movie where I think their situation is born out of their attitudes, and especially like the way things ultimately go and resolve, it feels like that's really the point here, is that this is something that they are feeding into with the way that they act.
The director I know had, like, her whole press thing since South by has been that this is Lord of the Flies meets Mean Girls. And I think it's in that essence where they're friends to a degree, but it's also like they have no other choice but to be friends, especially because of how rich they are. They have all this history with each other where they almost feel like they owe each other something, and I think that brings a really interesting dynamic with it.
Yeah, the power dynamics that come into play with just the wealth that is involved in this story is also interesting, and not necessarily one of the things that's like top line text, but if you're really digging to the characters, it's another really interesting element here. You mentioned the array of characters. There are several buzzy young actors in this movie. Who were you the most excited to see, and whose performance surprised you the most in the end?
I'd say Amandla's surprised me the most, because they end up being in a relationship with Maria Bakalova's character, who blew it away in Borat, and I think a lot of people were excited to see her. In the behind the scenes, they say that she was the best one in playing Mafia, and no one ever suspected it was her. but they play a couple who come into this almost from an outside perspective, especially Maria, because she's not friends with anybody. And while she plays a subtle performance, I like the nuances in her character and the way that she develops as the outsider of the group. But Rachel Sennott, I think she had the best lines. It wasn't even close. Learning that a bunch of them were improv, knowing how funny she's been in her Comedy Central show and Shiva Baby, I think she kills it in this one as well, especially when she's playing off of Pete Davidson.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Everybody else, though, they fit very well together, but I think when you're coming to the one-liner, no one's going to beat Davidson or Sennott.
It's one of those films where I don't feel like there's a weak member of the cast. Rachel Sennott is somebody who we've both been fans of for a little bit, and it's cool to get to see her lean into more of her comedic side here than she did in Shiva Baby, which, it's a lot of fun that she can play up these elements of her character. I got worried she would be too much based on the trailers, but
and she will be too much for some people. But I don't think for us it's like it hits that factor where it's way more hits than misses.
I don't think she ever became unintentionally annoying. She was maybe intentionally annoying in parts. I was also very pleasantly surprised by Maria, as you mentioned, just because it's such a restrained role compared to Borat, and she's so solid. I thought she was really cool as the sort of audience circuit. But for me, since I don't really watch industry, I haven't really seen Myha'la Herrold much. And I thought she was really, really good as like the practical, serious friend in the group. It's the kind of role that could be annoying. She could kind of be like the party pooper, but like I thought she made it seem real. And we talk about how there's a real history with these characters. I feel like you really feel all that backstory with her performance as well.
And shout out Lee Pace. We were talking about how there's a whole new younger generation who realized men used to be built differently back then. They got their Pete Davidsons today, and that's cute and all. But Lee Pace is that man, dude. I really love. There's a joke going on with him about him being a vet that I think as a perfect punchline at the end. But he's just a very dominant force in the beginning, as like literally the only older dude who's there as they get stuck during the storm. But I like what he brought to it as well.
Very lovable himbo.
For sure.
How much did the direction and writing stand out to you? We talked a little bit about Halina Reijn, I believe is how her name's pronounced, was the director. This is also written by Sarah DeLappe, based on a story by Kristen Roupenian.
Interesting. Okay.
What stood out to you in terms of how the film was assembled?
I had seen Halina's previous movie at TIFF called Instinct. If you have not, it's a movie about a therapist who falls in love with like a serial assault rapist, and they come up. It's an insane story. So coming into this, I knew she wouldn't be scared to tackle certain subsets of whatever the relationships may have going on. I think she knocked it out of the park. She talked a lot about how she wanted to create this claustrophobic style, and they discussed how a lot of the movie, because the camera's so close to them and because it needs to be dark outside, it's shot and lit by them. Like they're lighting it with their phones, and I found that fascinating. So there are certain moments where they're blocking themselves for the scene on camera, but then other moments where they need to stand in a certain place to light the other actresses. I thought that is genius. I can't even imagine the choreography going on while they're also trying to improv, while they also have all this continuity of blood and stuff on them, while the tensions are rising. Fantastic direction in that sense.
Yeah, I think the movie does really... The suspensefulness is really benefited by the direction and how underlit a lot of things are, purposefully keeping things obscured, keeping things a little bit mysterious, where
with a
you only see
house.
flashes of things and moments.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, it's a gorgeous house that definitely helps. And of course, by the end looks crazy given the hurricane stuff.
That's what you need with like Scream. You want a set piece like that. Yeah.
Right. And it's the kind of thing where, like, it's the direction and the writing and the performances that really stand out. But that's also, there's a huge element of production design in there, making sure everything looks right. So I think, it all speaks to the benefit of Halina and her abilities to get this get this vision complete for the movie. I was very impressed with the Bodies. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah.
You said you first saw it back at South by in March. So you've had a couple months now to sit on it, let it marinate. How has it settled with you? Are you still vibing with it?
Easily.
Has it grown as you've thought about it more?
I am looking forward to watching it again, and I would be discussing it with a second viewing if it wasn't for the delayed release that A24 is doing, which is why it's imperative, even with this video being early, and we'll talk spoilers very slightly in a little bit, to go into this with a group of friends first and foremost. This is one where I think you want to discuss it after it's done, but you also want to watch it and experience the gasps and everything in real time with people. But you also don't want to be spoiled. The best part of this movie, it is very rare. I haven't said this, I feel like, in a minute. This is a movie where you want to experience what happens for the first time. That's why I'm also annoyed with the trailer spoiling a lot of the lines, because they're not just telling you what the line is, they're ruining the context of the line before you see it. So definitely go into this one in the biggest screen possible. I'm hoping that they have a really solid release, because I'm looking forward to catching it in a very good Dolby mix, if possible, because that's what we got at South by. But I'm also excited to just catch little things. A little bit of spoilers, but there's some stuff that I've noticed in the trailer that kind of adds some
Do you want to get just full into... Do you want to just get full into spoilers right now? Because I feel like we've both talked about the things we've liked, talked about the performances we like. We're both
hopefully
positive
people
on the movie. I don't know if either of us would put it above the other two A24 movies that have come out this year, but it's been a strong movie year for A24.
No,
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I don't even want to rank them.
Let's
just a round of applause for A24. That is a stacked. Yeah, that's a stacked year right there. Everything, Marshall.
That's a very stacked year.
Two of those are already in my top 10. Now that this movie is out, I don't know if it'd break my top 10, but it's definitely getting a mention towards the end of the year. It's one of my favorite horrors / thrillers and / comedy. If that's not a perfect jambalaya of a movie right there, I don't know what else to tell you, but I would highly recommend this. Go watch it, because we're about to get into spoilers.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the spoilers for Bodies. Go ahead.
That she didn't actually make the zucchini bread. If you pay close attention, Zach, there is a Whole Foods bag in the background which showcases that she may not be as honest as we're led to believe in the beginning. One factor that I really like in the movie, which is that you're always seeing different sides of people depending on how you want to view them. So there's a bunch of little Easter eggs that I want to go back and see, especially because of whose house it is and things that are hidden in certain rooms. But getting into the big twist of the movie of wondering who it is, it has been a long time since we've gotten a reveal that actually feels not just refreshing, but worth it. That is actually saying something that isn't just retreading, I don't know, Scream. It's just a perfect example of what Gen Z is feeling at the moment. And that's what I mean by saying it doesn't need to reinvent the genre. It just needs to understand who the characters are in this movie.
Yes, totally. It's one of those film moments that you really want to get from a movie like this, where they show you a piece of information at the end and everything suddenly falls into place. All the puzzle pieces make sense now. And
it's how you see it.
It does it in a way that's more than just like, here is the reveal. Here's the person you've been wondering about all along. It's something that, as we were sort of trying to allude to in our review, informs the situation of the characters and their attitudes, the way in which they can all be a little bit self-absorbed, self-obsessed, and they jump to these conclusions about their scenario rather than fully explore what's going on. They're so obsessed with this idea of indicting somebody else, even if that somebody else is their friend, that they'll do that before they fully get to the truth of the matter.
I always say you don't know somebody unless
It's a very Twitter movie.
Yeah, unless you guys have stood up till 2 o'clock in the morning. You do not know the other person if you haven't been in this really tense scenario. There's no more tense scenario than when you think someone's killing bodies around you, right? It also helps that the editor for this movie was the editor of Green Room. I think another film which knows how to wrap up the tension. And in particular, the revelation coming from a phone. The fact that Pete Davidson was recording the entire thing.
From a TikTok.
It gets it. It's that, again, pursuit for attention that ends up coming back to literally slash him. For Pete Davidson to be the killed and the killer has to be the funniest thing. It has to be. And like you were saying, shoot.
it's just like one last joke the movie is pulling on you and all these characters, which is very funny. I love when a movie kind of has like a little bit of a fuck you edge in the end too.
Yes, it's telling you like, what he would do this. How else did you expect it to end? This is something.
Why did you think it was one of them?
It almost throws it back to you, but I love that idea that it's looking at Gen Z with this idea of paranoia, this anxiety that makes you question everything around you to the point that you're pointing fingers and honestly killing each other when there was no threat even there to begin with.
Yeah.
It's just beautifully put together. I want to catch it again. I want to catch it with an audience. I think there's a lot of laughs that may hit even better the second time now that you know more about the characters. And like I said, just seeing a set design that adds and informs a lot of the scenario in there. It's really good, dude.
Yeah, man. I mean, for you, was it also like you didn't really know what was happening until those final moments, until we're watching that video? Because like I thought that final sequence, it's really exciting because it does leave you guessing and unsure. Like why is the fact that it's not her phone even relevant or important? And whose phone could it be? And I don't know. I was surprised how surprised I was at the end of the ending, I guess.
That's how you do it. I know she said that they went back and had re-edited something really big towards the end, and I'm wondering if it's that, because she said that it recontextualized the entire point of the movie and the relationships that they had. But it's a great ending to it. This is one where even after you know it, going back in for the jokes, I think really something to really look forward to. One of my favorites of the year, dude. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. And check out any of these actresses' other works because they've done fantastic jobs. They're all really great in terms of comedy and just in quickness too, because this is a movie where they give it a lot. I will say it's a really great ensemble.
I don't want to I feel like it's almost sacrilegious to bring this up, but there is a part of me that's almost like, is this going to be like a short-term 12 in the sense that they're getting so many exciting young actors at a time right before they all pop off. And we might be looking back at this cast 10 years from now being like, wow, they were all in one movie together. And not to mention just the writing and directing too makes me really curious to see whatever they're up to next. So yeah, I mean, I felt like I was going to have more negative things to say, but I was just very pleased and enjoyed it. It's pretty breezy too. It doesn't overstay its welcome.
95.
It's a very fun time at the movies, and like you said, I think it's going to be a very fun time for people to bring some friends out, debate after the movie. Who do you think it was going to be? Like, oh, maybe that person's a little like you. I don't know.
Who'd you side with? Yeah, and then you end up playing bodies at home.
Exactly. All right, so I think that's about all for our first impressions of Bodies. You can catch more from me, Zach Shevich, by following me on Twitter, Instagram, or Letterboxd at zshevich, ZSHEVICH, and check out my YouTube or TikTok channels at Multiplex Show. Art, where can people find more from you?
You can find me over at Elmy Explain on Twitter, on YouTube, on Letterboxd, or every week here on the Intercut Podcast.
You can listen to every episode of the Intercut Podcast on iTunes, Anchor, Spotify, whatever your favorite podcatcher is. I happen to like Overcast. And then make sure you're subscribed not just to the audio podcast, but to the video feed as well on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/IntercutPod, where you can watch our bright smiling faces as we break down the latest in entertainment. Find new episodes of the Intercut Weekend Must Watch streaming on our YouTube channel every Monday at 3 or 7 p.m. Please leave us a comment, like the video, and consider heading over to iTunes to give us that much requested 5-star review. Shout out to our listeners in Argentina for putting us on the TV and film podcast charts out there. Like our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages. Support our Patreon. All of them are at Intercut Pod to get updates throughout the week from Art, from me, from all the guests we feature here on Intercut. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, check her texts. You got to be able to check your girlfriend's texts. I feel like that's an important part of a relationship.